Welcome to the Via Stoica Podcast. I'm Benny, and join me as we explore a Stoic way of life, one step at a time. A few days ago, I celebrated my 6th year of sobriety, and in order to stand still and reflect on it, I created a short on the YouTube channel with all the other Instagram and TikTok and all the other channels as well. And it was really great to see all the support that I got from it. The comments, the likes, and just people reaching out. So I really appreciate that, and thank you for doing so. But it also inspired me to create this video because I felt like I hadn't shared this story in one full episode. And it is, for me to reflect on it as well, but hopefully to inspire others, whether you are 6 years in as me, or 6 days, or 30 years, or thinking about making this step, or maybe even not realizing that that's what really is needed in your life. And maybe this is something that can help you. Maybe it'll help you to open up your eyes and see maybe other people around you who can be, an example or a guide to you when you need it. Because, let's face it, this journey does require support, and it does require the people around you. But hopefully this will set you in the right moment. And later on, I also want to share one of the Stoic practices that has really helped me in some specific moments. And it's not necessarily for, you can use it for other things as well, for sort of alcohol, but also when you're dealing with struggling with food or thinking about buying something or struggling there. So this exercise and this practice can help you with those things as well. And this isn't only a personal reflection, which it is, but it's also for me to share the story. And it's not just about the recovery part, but it's also about the bigger picture behind it, that you are able to make those deliberate choices to find the authentic self and to create the freedom for yourself to explore and to really thrive as an individual within a society as well. Let's start with the background, a little bit of my relationship with alcohol, because I think that this is key to when you want to go on your process of recovery, or when you want to go and make those improvements to find out how you are related to, in this case, alcohol. Because for everyone, the story is different. And that also determines what kind of support or what kind of help you need. So that's for you to figure out and find that support that is really required for you to make those necessary steps. Sometimes it can be joining a program. Sometimes it can be, for example, in my case, having the right examples around you, having made the deliberate choice at the beginning. So when I grew up in the Netherlands, and we do have a good a heavy drinking culture, and that's something that I was raised in as well, being around alcohol from a young age. So it became something that is normal, and one thing, it kind of moved into it becoming part of my identity. And as I went to college, as I grew up and started finding myself in those social surroundings, especially having moved out of my home, finding that freedom to really explore myself in that sense. But I was also, and this is something that I realized later, I was also more or less lost, right? I didn't know how to position myself among my peers, among my friends, and I was always looking for a sense of acknowledgement, a sense of confirmation that I belonged. And how I felt I was able to do so was by drinking excessively. And we had a group of friends who were doing the same, right? And this is why it is important to understand your individual relationship with alcohol, because it affects people differently. And it affected me in a big way. But during that first period, during those years of college, I didn't realize how much it was affecting me, because you were just staying in this loop and just kept going forward. And it was also too scary to pull myself out of that social surrounding, right? Because back then, not drinking was even less common as it is now. So to add to that story, I, for example, never drank when I was alone. When I was at home, didn't have any alcohol at home. I didn't feel the need to drink. It was just when I went out to that setting. I remember one day walking to the bar, ready for a party, and I remember telling myself, okay, let's have a Coca-Cola. Let's drink some soda at the beginning. Just like order a Coca-Cola. And as soon as I went up to the bar, I said, give me a beer, please. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I might as well start. So that was the mindset, right? That was the mindset. And in this setting with my friends, in a social setting, that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be drinking. And more or less, it really got attached to my identity. People call me Benny Drunk. My last name kind of rhymes with drunk in Dutch, so it's easy to make that jump. but still, it became part of who I was, right? It became such a big factor that I felt like if I wasn't drunk, I wouldn't be accepted by the group because that's the role that I played. And I think the fact that I didn't drink at home really kept me from developing severe alcoholism. And I call myself a problematic drinker, and I definitely could have made those steps towards an even uh, more severe case of alcoholism. But I guess that was my luck. And that also made it easier for me to quit. At least that's my personal opinion about this. So it was really a part of habit, ritual, identity. And maybe this is something that you can relate to, because a lot of the times when we talk about alcohol, we picture heavy alcoholics and having go to Alcoholics Anonymous and all of that stuff. And maybe that's something that is required for you, that would work for you to do. So definitely explore those options. But maybe you can see yourself in this in this example as well, as a being so socially pressured into drinking more than you would like, or maybe even than you would like at all. And that's good to evaluate. And we will talk about that later on when you make that decision to quit, to see that your social structure doesn't just depend on you drinking. And that is a really important realization, something that I've made a lot later. And it needed me to be in certain circumstances where I wasn't around alcohol, which is also important to have. But it required that example and that step to take, okay, my social identity isn't alcohol. It doesn't require it. So maybe you're in that stage as well. Maybe you're that kind of drinker. So think about it and reflect on that relationship again. One of the interesting things that I realized afterwards, and sometimes even during that heavy drinking spell during college and a few years after, is looking back at the results of it. I used to have blackouts when I drank, couldn't remember large parts of the evenings, and then I would wake up obviously feeling physically unwell, having extreme hangovers. But I think the biggest impact had the mental aspect of it, feeling depressed, feeling worried about what I'd done, not wanting to go out, trying to lock myself in because you would feel that the world was looking at you, judging you. And, without the recollection of what happened, who knows what might have occurred. So all of these things really had a big impact on me, and it weighed down. And then, then when you went back out again, you would drink and you would laugh it away and you wouldn't think about the consequences it would have. But it also showed me that those evenings, those parties, yet they were nice and we had a good time. And obviously now I have some interesting stories to share about what happened back in the day. But if I look back at the real impact those nights had on me of lived experience, they didn't really stand out too much. They all kind of blurred into one another. And that's when I realized that there's so more valuable interactions that you can have with the people around you, the people that you love, instead of just partying, but just having a good conversation or having a nice dinner or having more real connection based on attention and care instead of just drinking. And this reminds me of a video that Scott Galloway made, or he has a point that he always keeps making. He says that sobriety is the number one cause and the worst thing that has happened to young men because it prevents them from socializing. Now, again, this all depends on your relationship with alcohol. Maybe you can drink one or two and have that as social lubricant, the Dutch courage factor, as they say. But it really requires you to understand what your relationship is to alcohol or any other substance, because maybe you can't control it at all. And maybe those one or two drinks will lead to some catastrophic actions that might injure you or hurt you along the way. So that's really important to remember. And the real good social connections are made, at least from my experience, when you're sober, when you have a really good, coherent conversation, and when you can, give your full attention to someone around you. And believe me, with alcohol, especially after a lot of drinks, there's no more attention, right? There's no more coherent speech at all. So I think that that's a very slippery slope when we say that we need alcohol in order to socialize. It can help in certain situations. It definitely does, especially if you're a little bit nervous, but it can also lead to very damaging behavior. So that's why you need to understand what effects it has on you. So keep that in mind when you are going for your drink and when you are going for maybe a drink for at work or whatever. Maybe there is better to ease it down, to keep it down. But for me, for example, it would make me feel nervous. If there was a party, I would be nervous weeks before. thinking like, oh, come on, let's control myself this time. Right now, let's pace it, knowing in the back of my head that once I hit a certain amount of drinks, I would lose control altogether. So not just did I feel bad after, but I would also worry way before a party. So think about what impact it has on you mentally, but also on how it affects you like throughout the journey. Now, for me, the decision to quit drinking now, again, like looking back at it, and it's so much easier when you look back at these things. But it had started long before I made that decision. When I was married, I realized I had too much to lose because I understood the dangers of drinking during my college years. And after that, I had many moments where it might have gone way worse than it had. So I got quite lucky and I counted my blessings and I figured, okay, I can have a few drinks. And in that moment, I could more or less control myself, although there were some moments where I slipped up and the results were not nice. So I always felt that risk being there, right? That Mr. Hyde ready to rock out when certain amounts were hit or when the situation was just right. So that always made me a little bit nervous. But during my marriage, I felt like, okay, there's too much to lose. There's too much at stake. Let's try to keep that control. And that was the motivation in that moment, right? But I hadn't made a clear decision to not drink. But I was not drinking too much at that time. But then when my marriage ended and my future, fell apart, my entire world, fell apart as well. And I had to really rebuild myself. After that, I did have a couple of, I think it was a few weeks or maybe a month or so that I really went down to, drinking heavily again. I think what kind of helped me there was that I was living in Dubai and that it wasn't as easy as, for example, living in a city in the Netherlands to just go out and have a drink, right? To just go and walk around town and drink. You had to really make a deliberate choice to go to a bar or to go to a brunch or whatever and go and drink there, which I did on some occasions. And they, had the same results as before. Like out drunk, not knowing what you've done, being depressed the day after, and with age, the hangovers started to last longer and longer. So then when I had to go back to work, still feel physically ill and feel mentally exhausted, mentally depressed as well. And that took a few weeks until one morning I woke up hungover and I was living in a hotel room at that time, looking for a new apartment. And I woke up and, my phone was lost. I couldn't find it. Clothes were all over the place. I looked at the mirror. I saw myself just pale and red eyes. And I looked at myself, I was like, this is not going to be my life. This is not who I'm going to be. And if I don't do anything now, then it's just going to keep going worse and worse and worse. I'm going to, lose my job, maybe even worse than that. And this is not what I want for my life. So that's when I started making some decisions. And again, this wasn't the moment when I decided to fully quit drinking, but I had taken the time to say, okay, this is at least a pause, right? I need to stop drinking for a while to get myself in better shape. I need to go exercise. I need to read. I needed to take those steps that would help me get into a better place more or less immediately, right? Because there's still a lot going on in your mind. There's still a lot of things to process, but at least you can take those easier steps, right? Go to the gym, quit drinking, read more, eat healthy. All of those things, if the mind and body are connected, and if you make sure that your body is in a good state, then you can then slowly start working on your mind as well, which is important, right? Which is sometimes a step that in the self-help or in those messages that you see online, that is a step that they forget, right? It's about go to the gym, do this and this and this, and then you'll be fine. No, then the work starts. And that's what I realized. So I did all of those things. And yes, still occasionally had a few drinks here and there, but I was feeling better and I was able to, see the positive side again, get that balance of like, okay, I've got too much to lose, so keep it in track. And yeah, that's where it started to become more of an idea of like, hey, maybe quitting alcohol for good is the best thing for me to do. But then there was the social pressure, right? It was still there like, okay, if I don't drink, how can I then, be good in a social setting? How will people then outcast me? Will people think of me as, not part of the group? Will they stop inviting me? It was still part of my identity, right? It was still there like, okay, going to a bar, going to a party, you would need to have a drink in your hand in order to be part of it, in order to fit in. But there was one moment, and it was about 6 years ago. I was having a couple of gin tonics at that moment. I remember, I think I had maybe 3 or 4, and the person I was with was surprised that I was, taking them as easily as I could. And in my mind, there was this voice, I want to keep going, I want to keep going, I want to keep going. And luckily at that moment, I decided not to. But the consequences were of me having drunk that I was already started to feel sick. I felt sick in my stomach. Started getting a headache. So I, was in a lovely place with a lovely person. And then suddenly I couldn't enjoy it anymore because those drinks really had a big effect on me physically. And that's where I decided, listen, this is no longer my life. This is no longer something that I want to use. And this is also kind of where Stoicism starts coming in. I started practicing it before, but I also realized like my time is limited and I don't want to spend 4, 5, 6 hours feeling bad because I had 1 or 2 drinks. So that's where I made this conscious decisions like I'm no longer drinking, right? This is no longer a part of me. This is no longer who I am. As of now, I'm going to be alcohol free because it's going to make my life so much better. It's going to free me up. It's going to remove all the stress and anxiety before a party. It's going to remove all of the physical downsides, but also remove the mental negative aspects that it has. So that's when I decided. And to be honest, it felt liberating. It felt freeing. It felt like I've finally told myself, yes, this is fine, this is acceptable, and this is who I can be. And on top of that, it also came together with my sister and a cousin of mine also quit drinking. And me talking to them and them giving me the right example that when you do so, you're not going to get ostracized. People will find it difficult to accept. People will have to adjust to this new situation, but that's not your problem. Your problem is to make the right call for yourself. And as I learned and as I saw from their example, I realized like, yes, this is something I can do. I deserve to do for myself. And once I made a decision, I started to see my relationship with the others did change a little bit, of course, because alcohol is just a big ingrained part of our lives. But also the relationships became stronger because the people I noticed, they respected me for it. They appreciated it. They supported me a lot more than I thought. And that was great news, right? That was something that really showed me like, these are my true friends. These are the right people that I want to have in my life. And that gave me such a sense of fulfillment and such a sense of community that it actually helped me stay more on my path than before. And one thing to discuss here as well is the difference between having willpower to make a decision, for example, to quit alcohol, or having the right intrinsic motivation. Because willpower is like, clenching a fist. You can only clench it for this long, right? At one point, your muscles are going to slowly lose the tension and you're going to give away and your hand opens up again. But what you want to be able to do is to keep your hand open, to keep your muscles relaxed and still make that decision, right? Because you have the right movement from the inside, right? You have made a choice because you know it's the right call for you and it fits with you. And that's where it becomes your natural state of being, right? That's where it becomes who you are. And then you can keep going for long because then even in those difficult moments, you can fall back on that foundation. You don't have to make sure that your fist is clenched. No, you can go there relaxed and you know who you are. And from that base, you can then make the right calls in the difficult situations when, in this case, when you're surrounded by people drinking alcohol. And this is where I wanted to go to that practice that I mentioned at the beginning. Because I remember being in certain situations. I remember helping out in a bar in a festival in my college town a few years ago. And, helping out, serving drinks to my friends, right? My college friends. And there were moments, obviously, because you see them drinking, you see them having fun and dancing on the music. And I loved, working behind a bar. It's something that I've done many years as well, restaurants and kitchens as well. But I like this. It's kind of a nice job to have. But it was still in the situation that used to trigger me to go drink a lot. So I remember having certain moments there when I was serving beers to my friends, but also to, everybody else. And I thought, oh, maybe one beer wouldn't be too bad. Maybe I can have one beer just to join in, just to take the edge off. Right? And I was feeling fine. I was having a good time. And one of the Stoic practices that really helped me was the one of negative visualization. Because what it did to me in that moment when I was thinking about maybe I should have one beer, what problem could it be? What I did then is just to take a little pause and I started to think about the effects that one beer could have on me, right? Not necessarily, but the option was there. And that was also the reason what gave me so much anxiety before, because it was always an option. I started to think about what me drinking that first beer could result to. Probably have a second, maybe a third, a 10th, a 20th, have the blackout again, wake up hungover, not knowing what I've done, maybe having some really bad consequences. Maybe my luck would have run out, feeling depressed again the next day. So then I started to see the price of that one beer, and that price was far too big for me to pay. So I decided not to do it. And I've practiced this a few times and also try to apply it in other situations, for example, with food or with certain purchases, just to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what if I make this decision, what will happen now? What is a possible chain of events? And, maybe that's the worst case scenario and maybe it won't be as bad, but is this the price that I'm willing to pay? And for me with alcohol, since I've made that decision, it's like, no, this is not a price that I'm going to pay. And even if this one beer stays with one beer, I might feel, get a headache, which happens now a lot faster. And that's not something that I want. I want to enjoy my life. I want to feel physically fit in order to experience everything around me to the best possibilities. And then maybe not joining in into the festivities as the others do, that's great. I'm willing to do so. But at least I can experience it while I'm there. And now, when I'm in a party and everybody is too drunk, I just go home, go to bed, wake up the morning feeling fresh and fit and having had a good night, and at least a night that I can remember. So that's one of the practices that has really helped me overcome some of the most difficult moments that I've had on this journey of becoming sober. And Stoic philosophy really helped me to stay on my path, but also to make that initial decision. It showed me that I am responsible for my actions. I used to feel like, a victim after I had a big long night out and feeling sorry about myself the next day, feeling depressed. And now I realize, but I've made those decisions. Those decisions were mine to have those drinks, to have those evenings, and to spend all that money and all of those things. And it made me move the agency back to me. I could make those decisions earlier on and make sure that I was in control and that I made the right calls in the right moment. And if I didn't, then I had to assume the responsibility and the consequences for it. And it was for me to say, this is the life I want to live. And Stoic philosophy really helped me create that foundation and work as a guide where I could say, I'm no longer Benny, the one who drinks alcohol. I am now Benny, the one who lives deliberate. I am the one who makes the right, tries to make the best decisions and to make sure that I take care of myself and to those around me. And that's far more important than having this social connection of alcohol. And the important part here is as well that it's all about the actions, right? I can talk about this, but it's all about what I do. And then if you do this long enough, that becomes who you are. And now the people around me, they see, oh, wow, this is Benny and he's changed. He had this point of life, but now look at where he is. That fulfills me with pride, but it also gives something that I think is important, maybe the right example to those who are struggling with something similar. Maybe you're listening to this and say, oh, wow, that's something great. I wish I could be there. Try it, see it, think about it, reflect on where you are and where you'd like to be. That can really set, the goals to the right direction and give you the right motivation. Now, what these 6 years have shown me is that, first of all, I don't think we need alcohol in our lives. And I think the role that alcohol plays in our society is dangerous and it's far too big because nowadays you can't go anywhere without drinking or without people asking you questions like, oh, why aren't you drinking? It feels the other way around, right? It should be the same as with smoking. It's like, why are you smoking? Why are you drinking instead of why are you not drinking? So for me, that's one of the realizations that I've had about the role that alcohol plays in our lives. And that's why it's possibly more difficult to step out of it, especially if you're a heavy social drinker like I was. It kind of seeps in, it kind of stays there in the background, and it can have a long-lasting effect on you as well. Again, what I fear the most as of becoming ostracized is that it actually increased the value of my social connections. I haven't lost too many of my friends, to be honest, but the ones that are here, they're so much stronger and so much more. I respect them and hopefully they respect me as well. So my biggest fear was actually turned into my, strongest gain, to have those strong connections and to have people come to say, wow, that's really, but what was my biggest fear actually turned into my biggest gain. And it has really enriched my life for the better. And I've gained so much more. I've gained so much more energy. I've gained so much more time of not feeling sick and sorry for myself. I've gained so much more insights in the world around me and in myself, and just more enjoyment. I've been more content since I've stopped drinking. And to be honest, I can't imagine starting ever again. But that is also something that I've got to stay on top of, and it's a and constant deliberate choice that I have to make at any moment when the urge or the temptation arises. And this was an episode about my personal journey on sobriety, but it can be applied to so many more things. If you feel that a certain external cause takes over your life and makes the choices for you or moves you in a certain way, then maybe it's time to stop and reflect and think about the relationship you have to that external, in this case, to alcohol, and then look for support. See what way you want to go, right, with the right motivation, and then look for the support groups, the people around you that can help you make those decisions, and maybe, and especially at the beginning, help you stay away from that what is causing you the problems, from that external that is taking you away from the life that you deserve to live. Because this is sometimes a problem with Stoic philosophy, but with self-help in general, because it says self-help. And some people feel that we are not allowed to ask for help from others because we're supposed to help ourselves. But we need that support. Stoicism only works if you have, your mind is rational and you can apply reason and you can look objectively at all the things that are happening around you. But sometimes we are so influenced by other things that we lose that rational mindset. And then we need support. We need maybe therapy, counseling, coaching, having good conversations with our friends to bring us back to that rational mindset in order to make those right calls and to make those right decisions. So please feel free to reach out when you need to and look what help really works for you, because those are the most important steps that you can take. You may need to make the decision for yourself first. That is really important. But to get started, to stay on track and to really make the good progression is something that you might or probably need help for. So I want to thank you for listening and for letting me share my story, my reflection. This was as much as a part of my journey as well, to share it, to really think back on these things, and also to be grateful for where I am right now. But also to maybe, give someone here, maybe you're listening, a little bit of inspiration to keep going or to start this journey, maybe with alcohol or maybe with something else, maybe to reach out for the right support that you might need or anything else. So hopefully you appreciate it. And if you like it, please let me, give me a comment or a question that you have to ask. But a like and subscribe to the podcast would be fantastic already, and a great sign of your appreciation. But for now, I want to thank you very much for listening, and we'll hope to see you in the next one.